There are times when love does not blow up in your face. It does not end with yelling or doors slamming hard enough to shake the walls. Sometimes it fades out so quietly you almost miss it. No screaming, no dramatic tears, just a shift you feel before your mind can catch up. Like stepping onto a frozen lake and hearing the ice crack somewhere under your boots. Like a tight grip around your chest that does not loosen. That is how it happened to me. At our company holiday party, under warm yellow lights and polite laughter that did not mean much of anything, I heard that sound in my own life. I was standing near the bar when it happened. Between rows of glass shelves and soft reflections in the mirror behind them, I saw my wife kissing my best friend. My heart did not start pounding. It did not race. It stopped. I did not shout. I did not rush at them. I did not even breathe for a second. Instead, I turned my head and looked across the room at his wife. She was already looking back at me. She walked over, calm as could be, and said in a low voice, "Stay steady. Let them expose themselves." My name is Ryan Caldwell. I am 51 years old. Until that night, I believed in a quiet kind of stability. I had lived in Chicago long enough that winter did not bother me unless it turned dangerous. Snow was just part of the background. Cold was something you managed. I worked as a senior operations manager at a consulting firm. In my line of work, flashiness did not last and sloppy thinking got you pushed out fast. I believed in order. I believed in documentation. I believed in doing things the right way, even when nobody was checking. I figured my marriage ran on the same principles. My wife, Hannah, and I had been married for 23 years. There were no scandals, no explosive fights, no dramatic breakdowns. What we had instead was something slower. Conversations that ended a little too soon. Dinners eaten next to each other instead of across from each other. Work coming first so often that it stopped feeling temporary. I noticed the distance, but I told myself it was normal. Life settles. Things shift. The holiday party was downtown in a hotel ballroom that felt too grand for its own ceiling. The chandeliers were oversized. A jazz band played just loud enough to cover up real conversations. Human resources called it relationship building. Senior leadership called it visibility. Hannah insisted we go. People pay attention to who shows up together, she told me while fastening her earrings in front of the mirror. It matters. She said it softly, in that reasonable tone people use when the decision has already been made. We had barely walked into the ballroom before she drifted away. She got pulled into a group near the center of the room. She looked confident, relaxed, like she belonged exactly where she was. I watched her laugh at something Jason Miller said. Jason had been my closest friend since my first year at the firm. More than 2 decades. We had survived promotions, terrible bosses, layoffs, restructures. We shared jokes no one else understood. Our wives were friends. Our vacations sometimes overlapped. Our lives were tied together in ways I had never thought to question. Jason came up to me near the bar, clapped my shoulder, handed me a drink. He made a joke about the music making him feel older than he was. Everything felt normal. Too normal. After a while, the noise in that room started pressing in on me. I excused myself and headed toward the sidebar, wanting just a minute where no one needed anything from me. The bar stretched along the wall, half hidden by tall flower arrangements and glowing bottles. The bartender was polishing glasses. Someone nearby laughed too loudly. The bass from the band pulsed through the floor. I stepped closer, and then I saw them. They were not out in the open. They were tucked into a narrow blind spot behind the bar, the kind of place you would only notice if you had been in that room before. Hannah and Jason. His hand rested low on her waist. Her fingers were hooked into the collar of his jacket. The kiss was not rushed. It was not clumsy. It was practiced. Familiar. Not stolen. Shared. It was the kind of kiss that does not wonder if it is allowed. The room did not spin. I did not gasp. It was like my body shut off a switch. My chest tightened so fast I thought I might collapse right there. My fingers went numb against the edge of the bar. For a moment, I understood what people mean when they say their heart freezes. Not as a figure of speech. As something physical. A muscle refusing to move. I do not know how long I stood there. A few seconds. Maybe more. Around me, the party kept going. Glasses clinked. Someone from Human Resources called for another round of drinks. The band did not miss a beat. I stepped back slowly, careful, like sudden movement might shatter whatever thin layer was holding me upright. That is when I noticed Nicole. She was standing near the edge of the dance floor. Her posture was straight. Her face was calm, almost unreadable. Her eyes were locked on the same hidden space behind the bar. She had seen it too. When our eyes met, I expected to see shock, or pain, or anger. What I saw instead was recognition. She walked toward me, steady on her heels, not rushing. When she reached my side, I could catch the faint scent of her perfume. Clean. Familiar. She kept her eyes forward. "Do not react," she said quietly. "Not here." My throat felt scraped raw. "You knew?" "For a few weeks," she answered. "Long enough to understand what this really is." I turned toward her. "What does that mean?" She finally looked at me fully. "This is not just about an affair. And if we confront them now, we give them room to twist the story." Her words cut clean through the fog in my head. "They will call it a mistake," she continued. "They will say it was a misunderstanding, that it just happened." I gave a small shake of my head. "So what do? We wait." "For what?" "For them to make it public in their own way," she said. "So nobody can pretend it was accidental." Across the room, Jason laughed again at something Hannah said. She leaned closer to him, either unaware or unconcerned that the ground under her life was already cracking. Nicole's voice softened. I did not want to believe it at first. 20 years does not vanish overnight. But lies have a pattern. They leave evidence. "What kind of evidence?" I asked. "The kind that shows up in paperwork," she said. "Not just in the bedroom. That is when something colder than jealousy settled in my stomach. This was not just betrayal. It was preparation." Nicole placed her hand lightly on my arm. Not to comfort me, to steady me. "Stay calm, Ryan," she said. "We need them to finish what they started." The music swelled. Someone clapped near the stage. The party surged forward like nothing had happened. But something had. I did not feel rage. Not yet. I felt something sharper. Focus. For the first time that night, I realized what I had seen was not the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of a reckoning. And this time, silence was not surrender. It was strategy. I left without saying goodbye. I did not look for Hannah. I did not look for Jason. I walked past the valet stand, pulled my coat tight against the Chicago cold, and stepped into a night that smelled like snow and exhaust. The city was dressed for December. Dirty slush along the curbs. Black Friday banners snapping against lamp posts. People hurrying with shopping bags and plans that did not include me. About 20 minutes later, my phone lit up. Got stuck talking with legal and finance. "Do not wait up." I stared at the message while stopped at a red light. The words felt chosen with care, like she had rehearsed them in her head before typing. "Okay," I wrote back. It was not forgiveness. It was containment. The house was dark when I got home. Quiet in a way that felt arranged, almost staged. Like a model home after closing hours. I set my keys on the entry table and stood there longer than necessary, listening. No television. No dishwasher. Just the steady hum of the furnace fighting off the cold. I poured a glass of water and drank it too fast. My hand trembled. The glass knocked lightly against the counter, the sound echoing in the empty kitchen. In the living room, the Christmas tree glowed in the corner, half decorated. Hannah had said we would finish it together once things slowed down. I stood in front of it and felt something inside me loosen. Not in a dramatic way. Not all at once. More like a seam pulling apart, thread by thread. I sat down on the couch and looked at my reflection in the dark window. The man staring back at me did not look broken. He looked awake. More awake than I had felt in years. I did not cry. That surprised me. When Hannah came home close to midnight, I heard her before I saw her. The soft thud of her heels being kicked off. Keys dropped on the table. A sigh that sounded practiced. "You left early," she said when she walked into the living room. "I thought you would still be there." "I was not feeling great," I told her. She nodded quickly and moved past me. It was a long night. She kissed my cheek. Fast. Familiar. Efficient. Then she went upstairs to shower. The water started running. I stayed on the couch, counting the seconds between my breaths, wondering if guilt had a sound. If it sounded like water hitting tile. When she came to bed, she fell asleep almost immediately, her back turned toward me. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying moments I had brushed aside for months. Meetings that ran late into the night. Passwords changed without explanation. Her phone placed face down every time it was set on a table. The way she stopped asking about my day. Sometime before dawn, one thought settled heavy in my chest. The worst part was not the kiss. The worst part was not the kiss. It was knowing she had stopped really seeing me long before her lips ever touched his. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The room was still dim. Hannah was asleep on her stomach, one arm tucked under the pillow, breathing slow and steady. She looked peaceful, no tension in her face, no trace of guilt, no sign that anything in her world had shifted. I studied her for a minute, searching for something. Regret, anxiety, a crack in the mask. There was nothing. I got out of bed quietly and went downstairs. In the kitchen, I made coffee and drank it standing at the counter. The morning news murmured in the background, talking about markets dipping, companies cutting staff, prices climbing again. The usual noise. While the coffee cooled in my mug, I opened our joint bank account on my phone. At first glance, nothing looked dramatic. No big withdrawals. No obvious red flags. But the longer I stared, the more I saw patterns. Small transfers. Regular timing. Labels that were vague enough to slide by without raising suspicion. Consulting. Travel advance. Amounts that repeated like habits. I told myself it was probably harmless. I did not believe that for a second. When I got to the office, there was still leftover energy from the party. People were talking louder than usual. Did you see Jason working the room last night? Hannah really knows her stuff. This next presentation is going to be huge. Jason stopped by my desk mid-morning. His smile was easy, comfortable. Great turnout last night, he said. Feels like we have momentum. Sure does, I replied. He leaned against my desk and started talking about the upcoming pitch. Leadership was excited. This project could shift the direction of the firm. He sounded confident. Too confident. As he spoke, I noticed something unsettling. He sounded rehearsed. Just before lunch, my phone buzzed. Miss you. Dinner tonight? I stared at the message longer than necessary. Sure, I typed back. Around noon, I left the building and walked a few blocks despite the cold. I needed air that did not smell like carpet cleaner and ambition. I found a bench in a small park and sat down. My breath came out in white clouds. I checked my phone again. There was a new message from a number I did not recognize. We need to talk. Not about feelings. About facts. Then another line. Nicole. My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Go home. Eat dinner. Pretend nothing had cracked open the night before. That instinct had kept my life smooth for years. But another thought followed, quieter and heavier. If Nicole was reaching out, this was bigger than just me. When I typed, the reply came immediately. Tomorrow, 8 in the morning. Corner cafe on Maple and 3rd. Small place. Quiet. I locked my phone and let out a slow breath. That evening at dinner, Hannah talked about work. About stress. About feeling overlooked by leadership. She laughed lightly and reached across the table for my hand. I let her take it. You are quiet, she said. Everything okay? I am tired, I answered. That was true, just not in the way she thought. That night, after she fell asleep, I lay awake again. But my thoughts were not spiraling anymore. They were lining up. Nicole knew more than she had shared at the party. Jason was involved in something deliberate. And whatever it was not going to resolve itself through honesty or apology. I did not feel rage. I felt pressure, the kind that builds before a decision. Silence had once protected my life. Now it was turning into something else. The cafe on Maple and 3rd was nearly empty when I walked in the next morning. It was the kind of place designed for short visits. Plain wooden tables, thick ceramic mugs. No music loud enough to stir emotion. Conversations stayed low by default. I chose a seat near the back, facing the window, so I could watch the street without being watched. Snow from the night before sat in gray piles along the curb. Chicago winter did not make grand entrances. It just settled in and stayed. I ordered black coffee and let it sit untouched. Nicole arrived exactly at 8. She wore a dark coat buttoned high. Her hair was pulled back. She looked awake, but not made up for show. She scanned the room once, spotted me, and walked straight over. Thank you for coming, she said as she sat down. I was not sure I should, I told her. She nodded. That makes sense. We sat in silence for a moment. It was not awkward. It was measured. Then she placed a slim folder on the table between us. The cardboard made a soft, final sound when it hit the surface. I found out about 3 weeks ago, she said. Not everything. Just enough to know something was wrong. Did you confront him? I asked. Yes. Once. In private. She let out a slow breath. He told me it was nothing. Said he and Hannah were just collaborating closely. Said I was overreacting because I was tired. That stung in a way I did not expect. How quickly doubt can be reframed as weakness. I wanted to believe him, she continued. 20 years does not vanish in a day. But lies get careless. She opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots. Messages between Jason and Hannah. There was nothing explicit. No romance. No obvious affection. It was worse than that. The tone was confident, strategic, full of references to drafts, meetings, timelines, next steps. They were careful, Nicole said. No pictures. No obvious language. But once you stop looking for emotion and start looking for coordination, it is obvious. I felt my throat tighten. I did not come to you right away, she added. At first, I thought this was just an affair. And now? I asked. Now I know it is not. She slid another sheet across the table. Bank statements. Transfers broken into small increments. Labels generic. Dates lining up cleanly with conference trips and client dinners. One number jumped out at me immediately. Our joint account. My chest tightened. They took money, I said. Yes, Nicole answered. Small amounts over time. Enough to test what they could get away with. A metallic taste rose in my mouth. I checked our account last night, I said. I saw patterns. I told myself I was imagining it. You were not, she said quietly. And that is why I slowed down. Slowed down. I repeated. If I had reported it immediately, she explained, they would claim it was accidental. Shared access. Weak controls. Maybe even blame accounting. She tapped the folder lightly. But intent is harder to deny. I leaned back in my chair. The coffee between us had gone cold. What do you need from me? I asked. Confirmation, she said. And patience. She pulled out a tablet and turned it toward me. My presentation filled the screen. At least, it looked like mine. The structure was identical. The slide titles mirrored my wording. Even the order of examples followed the same logic. On the fourth slide, there was a sentence with a small typo I had meant to fix months ago. They copied it, I said quietly. Yes, she replied. And they are planning to present it as their own next week. Something settled in my chest then. Not anger. Clarity. If we confront them now, I said slowly, they will say it was shared. Collaborative, she confirmed. So we let them present it. Yes. So they have to explain it. She nodded. And legal can see it was not accidental. Her eyes met mine. We need them to finish what they started. I ran a hand through my hair. This is going to blow everything up. For the first time, her composure slipped. She looked down at her hands. I know, she said. I do not hate Jason for choosing her. I hate that he chose lies instead of ending it first. Her voice steadied again. I am done protecting him. I thought about Hannah reaching for my hand the night before. About her saying she felt overlooked. About how easily she had lied. I am in, I said. Nicole let out a long breath. Relief crossing her face like a shadow lifting. Then we do this clean, she said. No drama. Just facts. Metadata. Access logs. Bank records. I can help with that, I answered. As we stood to leave, she paused. There will be moments you want to confront her, she said. To demand answers. I already knew. Do not, she continued. Emotion gives them room to rewrite the story. Outside, the cold air hit hard. I walked back toward the office with the folder tucked under my arm. My steps were steady. I was not angry. I was recalibrating. For the first time since the party, I understood the weight of what we were carrying. Truth is not loud. It is heavy. The next 7 days moved differently. Not slower exactly. Just heavier. Every hour felt like it mattered. On the surface, nothing changed. I still woke before my alarm. I still poured coffee into the same chipped mug. I still kissed Hannah on the cheek before work and asked about her meetings. I nodded at Jason in the hallway. I answered emails. I joined planning calls. I smiled when expected. I became very good at looking normal. Underneath, everything tightened. Nicole and I only communicated when necessary. Short messages. Precise wording. No speculation. No emotional shorthand. We wrote everything as if it might one day be read out loud in a room full of lawyers. Facts only. By the second day, I requested system access logs from information technology under the pretense of a routine audit. The access logs did not scream. They did not trigger alarms. They just sat there, plain and factual. Timestamps. Internet protocol addresses. Quiet details that told a clear story if you were willing to read them. Hannah's login credentials had opened my archived project folders twice late at night. Both dates lined up exactly with days Jason had asked me for updated drafts for review. I documented everything. On the third day, I almost broke. It was late. Hannah was asleep upstairs. I sat alone in the living room scrolling through old photos on my phone. Thanksgiving dinners, beach vacations, a Christmas morning where we both looked younger and stupidly confident about the future. My chest tightened until it hurt. For a moment, I wanted to wake her up. I wanted to stand at the edge of the bed and ask why. I wanted to ask if any of it had been real. I stood up. I walked halfway to the stairs. Then I stopped. Emotion gives them room to rewrite the story. I turned around and went back to the couch. By day 4, Jason stopped by my office. "Just want your eyes on the final deck," he said casually, leaning against my doorframe. "You know how leadership is." "Of course," I replied. "Send it over." He sent it within minutes. That night, I opened his file and placed it side by side with my original. Same structure, same wording, same flow of logic. Even the same unnecessary slide I had debated cutting months earlier and never did. They had not collaborated. They had copied. Nicole confirmed what I already knew. "The metadata is intact," she told me in a short message. "Creation dates are clean. They cannot argue with timestamps." On day 5, Hannah changed again. She became warmer, softer, almost nostalgic. She cooked dinner twice that week. She suggested we take a weekend trip once things settled down. She touched my arm when she spoke, like she was checking if I was still physically there. Guilt maybe, or instinct. Either way, it confirmed what Nicole had warned me about. They felt safe. That night, I checked our retirement account. The one we rarely talked about. The one that felt like a locked room in our house. There were no dramatic withdrawals. Just patterns. Small reallocations. Short-term withdrawals labeled as internal adjustments. Nothing reckless. Nothing obvious. It was careful. It was practiced. On day 6, Nicole called me instead of texting. "I am tired," she admitted quietly. "Of this?" I asked. "No. Of pretending I do not miss who he used to be." I did not interrupt her. "I do not hate him for choosing her," she continued. "I hate that he chose deception instead of honesty. He could have ended it cleanly." There was silence on the line. Not heavy, just honest. "We are almost there," I said. "I know," she answered. "And that scares me more than the beginning did." The final day arrived without drama. Hannah left early that morning, dressed carefully. Jason sent a thumbs-up symbol in the group chat. The office buzzed with anticipation. The pitch was scheduled for mid-afternoon. Leadership, legal, human resources. Everyone important would be there. At noon, Nicole sent one last message. "Everything is ready. Legal has the file. We let them speak." I read it twice. Then I deleted it. At 2:30, I took a seat in the second row of the main conference room. Nicole sat 3 seats behind me, angled slightly away. We did not acknowledge each other. Jason stood at the front near the podium. He looked relaxed, confident, like a man expecting praise. Hannah stood beside him, tablet in hand. They began. And as they did, I understood something clearly. This was not about catching them in a lie. It was about letting them commit to it. The presentation started the way all important meetings do. Quietly. Papers shuffled. The projector hummed. Someone cleared their throat. Outside the glass walls, the Chicago sky hung low and gray. A winter afternoon that made everything feel heavier than it looked. Jason opened with a polished introduction. "This initiative represents a strategic opportunity," he said smoothly, "positioning us for long-term growth." Heads nodded. Hannah transitioned seamlessly into timelines and deliverables. She spoke with steady confidence, as if every word had been built from her own effort. I watched her hands as she gestured. Steady, controlled. I felt that tightening in my chest again. Not anger. Recognition. This was the real moment. Not the kiss behind the bar. Not the lies at home. This. They were not hiding anymore. They were claiming. 5 minutes into the presentation, the back door opened quietly. At first, no one noticed. 2 people stepped inside. One from legal, one from compliance. The shift in the room was subtle but immediate. Chairs straightened. Pens paused. The chief executive officer glanced toward them, then back to Jason. "Before we continue," she said evenly, "we need to address something." Jason hesitated, just long enough to be seen. "Yes," he said with a forced smile. The chief executive officer folded her hands on the table. "Legal received documentation this morning raising concerns about the origin of this material." The room went still. Hannah's eyes flicked toward Jason. "This documentation includes original drafts, access logs, metadata, and financial records," the chief executive officer continued. We are going to pause this presentation. Jason gave a short, tight laugh. I am sure this is a misunderstanding. A representative from legal stepped forward. We would like you to explain why large portions of this presentation match internal files authored by Mr. Caldwell word for word, including timestamps that predate your involvement. Every head turned toward me. I stood up. Yes, I said calmly. Those drafts are mine. I retained original files with creation dates and documented access histories. Hannah inhaled sharply. Jason shook his head. Ryan shared those files. This was collaborative. Legal nodded slightly. We considered that possibility, which is why we reviewed system access logs. She looked directly at Hannah. Your credentials accessed Mr. Caldwell's archive folders on 2 separate occasions outside standard business hours. The color drained from Hannah's face. I was asked to review materials, she said, her voice unsteady. I did not plan for this. The chief executive officer raised her hand. We are not finished. Compliance spoke next. We also identified financial transfers connected to a recently formed limited liability company funded through accounts associated with both presenters. These transfers align with dates connected to travel reimbursements. Jason's composure cracked. This is being taken out of context, he said quickly. We intended to clarify ownership before presenting it as your own? The chief executive officer asked. Silence. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. I felt trapped, she said softly. He told me it was temporary, that we would fix it. No one answered her. The chief executive officer turned to legal. Suspend the presentation. Escort Mr. Miller and Miss Caldwell to Human Resources. Security stepped in, not aggressively, just present enough to end the discussion. As Jason gathered his things, he looked at me. For the first time, there was no confidence in his eyes. Only calculation dissolving into reality. Nicole stood as they were escorted out. Her face gave nothing away. When the room cleared, the chief executive officer addressed those of us who remained. This meeting is adjourned. We will follow up with next steps. People filed out quietly, whispering, avoiding direct eye contact. The room felt smaller now, stripped of illusion. Nicole passed by me as she headed toward the door. We needed them to say it out loud, she murmured. They did, I replied. Outside the conference room, Hannah stood near the elevators. Her arms were wrapped around herself. Ryan, she said, please. I stopped a few feet away. I did not want it to happen like this, she whispered. I know, I said, but wanting is not the same as choosing. Her mouth opened like she was about to argue. Then it closed. I walked past her without another word. In the hallway, something inside me loosened. Not relief. Release. The truth had not exploded. It had simply been set on the table. Clear. Undeniable. That was enough. The hallway felt longer after they were escorted out. Not physically. Emotionally. The air felt heavier. Conversations rose and fell in low murmurs. People avoided each other's eyes. Office doors closed gently, like the building itself did not want to add more noise. I did not return to my desk. I stepped outside. The cold Chicago air hit my face. Light snow drifted down, not fully committing to the ground. The city kept moving. Cars rolled past. A man argued into his phone on the sidewalk. Life did not pause for personal collapses. Nicole stepped outside a moment later. She stood beside me, and for a while, she did not say anything. Neither of us spoke at first. We just stood there in the cold. They will suspend him today, Nicole said after a while. Human Resources already started the paperwork. And Hannah? I asked. Administrative leave. Legal will handle the rest. I nodded. It was complicated, just like we expected. We stood there a little longer. Two people who had just watched their past detach itself from the present in a clean, undeniable way. I am tired, Nicole said quietly. It was not a complaint, just a fact. I know, I answered. Inside the building, the company shifted into damage control with the smooth efficiency of a machine that had rehearsed for this kind of crisis. Emails went out. Calendars updated. Meetings disappeared. By the end of the day, a short internal notice was distributed. 2 employees have been placed on leave pending investigation into violations of company policy. No names. No details. Clean wording for a messy truth. I left early. When I opened the front door, the house felt different. Not hollow like before. Tense. Like it had been waiting for me. Hannah sat at the dining table. Her coat was still on. Her purse sat on the floor beside her chair. Her eyes were red, but her back was straight, like she had practiced what she wanted to say. "You blindsided me," she said. I placed my keys on the counter carefully. "I stopped covering for you." Her jaw tightened. "You could have talked to me. You did not have to humiliate us." "This was not about humiliation," I said evenly. "It was about the truth." She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "You planned this." "Yes," I said. The word landed between us like something heavy. She searched my face. Maybe for anger. Maybe for satisfaction. She did not find either. "I plan not to be lied to anymore," I continued. "I plan not to lose my work, my name, and my future quietly." Her voice cracked. I felt invisible. I let the silence stretch before answering. "I believe you," I said. "But feeling invisible does not justify erasing someone else." She sank back into her chair. For a moment, we just breathed in the same room. Then I reached into my bag and placed a thin envelope on the table. "What is that?" she asked. "Clarity." Inside were copies of financial statements. A preliminary separation agreement drafted by an attorney I trusted. A list of actions already taken. Accounts secured. Passwords changed. Access revoked. She stared at the papers like they were written in a language she did not understand. "You spoke to a lawyer," she whispered. "I spoke to reality," I said. "The lawyer helped translate." She covered her face with her hands. "I never meant to hurt you." I thought about that before I answered. "I know, but intent still matters. You taught me that." That night, she packed a suitcase and moved into the guest room. I slept alone in our bed for the first time in decades, and I felt something I did not expect. Relief. Not because I had won. Not because I had punished anyone. Because I was no longer negotiating with denial. The next days unfolded with precision. Legal interviewed me. I handed over documentation. Information technology confirmed the access logs. Compliance traced the financial transactions. Each department worked quietly, methodically. Facts moved faster than feelings. Jason did not contact me. Hannah and I spoke only about logistics. Mail forwarding. Bills. The dog's schedule. One evening, she apologized again. Softly. Without expectation. "I wanted to forgive you," I told her. "But forgiveness does not mean continuing to live together." She nodded, understanding too late what that meant. One afternoon at work, I packed up old project drafts from my office drawer. I did not feel anger, just finality. I kept what mattered. I left the rest. As I zipped my bag, I realized something else. I was not afraid of what came next. The fear had lived in uncertainty, in sensing something was wrong and convincing myself it was not worth confronting. Now everything was exposed. Fear had nowhere left to hide. That evening, Nicole and I met for dinner at a small restaurant neither of us had been to before. Neutral ground. We did not talk about Jason. We did not talk about Hannah. We talked about sleep, about therapy, about how strange it felt to be tired in a clean way. "I do not feel victorious," she said at one point. "Neither do I answered. She nodded. "Good. That means we did not lose ourselves." When I got home, Hannah was gone. A note waited on the kitchen counter. "I will stay with my sister for a while." I folded it once and placed it in a drawer. That night, for the first time since the party, I slept deeply. Not because everything was resolved. Because nothing was hidden. The house learned how to be quiet again. Not the brittle silence after an argument. Not the hollow quiet of waiting for someone to walk through the door. A steady quiet. 2 days after she left, I changed the locks. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. I separated the accounts. Joint savings first. Then the retirement fund. The 401k paperwork took time. Forms. Signatures. Waiting periods. There was comfort in the process. Numbers lined up. Ownership was defined. Nothing vague remained. Hannah stopped by once during the week to collect the rest of her things. She stood in the doorway like a guest. We spoke calmly. Practically. She apologized again. This time without explanation. Without defense. "I know saying I am sorry does not fix it," she said. "No," I replied. "But how you say it still matters." She nodded, eyes lowered, then left without looking back. At work, the investigation continued without spectacle. Jason's name vanished from calendars. Hannah's office stayed dark. The project they tried to claim was frozen, then reassigned under strict documentation and oversight. Leadership thanked me for my professionalism. Legal thanked me for my restraint. No one called it bravery. I did not need them to. One afternoon, I walked past the conference room where everything had unraveled. The chairs were stacked. The projector unplugged. Sunlight stretched across the floor. The room looked ordinary again. It had done its job. Nicole and I stayed in touch. Our conversations shifted over time. Less about evidence, more about living. One Saturday morning, we met again at the cafe on Maple and 3rd. Snowmelt dripped from the awning. People worked on laptops. A couple argued quietly about something small and forgettable. Life continued inches away from where ours had cracked open. "How are you sleeping?" she asked. "Better," I said. "I still wake up early, but I do not lie there wondering what I missed." She gave a faint smile. "Same." We sat in silence for a moment. "Do you ever think about confronting it sooner?" she asked. "Saying something the second you knew?" I considered that. "Sometimes," I admitted. But then I remembered that waiting was not weakness. It was preparation. She nodded. "People confuse silence with surrender. That is because they do not see the work happening underneath," I said. The quiet work I had started doing for myself. Running in the mornings again, even when the sidewalks were slick with winter grime. Cooking real meals. Turning down meetings that did not matter. Saying no without explaining myself. I began therapy, not because I felt shattered, because I wanted to understand how I had ignored my own instincts for so long. Months passed. The company stabilized. I was offered a leadership role on a new initiative. Transparent, collaborative, documented carefully. I accepted, not for validation, because it felt clean. Hannah and I finalized the separation without drama. She moved forward quickly. I wished her well without following her path. One evening, I stood at the kitchen counter and set a glass of water down. The sound caught my attention. It was solid, whole. I smiled before I realized I was smiling. Here is what I learned about what people like to call quiet revenge. It is not revenge. It is the decision to stop disappearing, to stop absorbing damage and calling it love, to stop confusing endurance with dignity, to stop mistaking patience for self-erasure. It is the moment you decide to see clearly and then act without cruelty, without spectacle, without asking permission. The real reckoning never needed an audience. It only needed the truth. Sometimes I think back to that night at the party. The music, the laughter, the way everything looked intact until it was not. I remember how close I came to exploding in that moment. And I am grateful I did not. Waiting did not cost me my voice. It gave it shape.